Millionaire receives a hug by mistake from a poor girl and discovers true love. The morning sun spilled across downtown Manhattan, lighting up the glass towers and the restless crowd weaving between yellow cabs. Lila Carter clutched her phone, scrolling through a message from her best friend. Arriving at Grand Central in 3 minutes. Her heart leapt. She hadn't seen Megan in 4 years, not since the accident, not since everything in her life fell apart. She pushed through the crowd, her breath quick from running, her arms full of grocery bags from the cafe where she worked double shifts. Gate 12, Blue Coat, the message said. Her eyes darted from face to face until she spotted him, a tall man in a dark blue coat, broad shoulders, phone in hand, looking lost. Relief flooded her. "Megan!" she called, and before her brain caught up, her body moved first. She dropped the bags and threw her arms around him from behind. The man froze mid-step. Lila buried her face in his back, laughing breathlessly. "Oh my God, you're really here." The scent of cedarwood and expensive cologne hit her senses. Something was wrong. The man turned slowly, and Lila's smile collapsed. He wasn't Megan. He wasn't even close. His sharp gray eyes met hers, startled but not unkind. He said, one brow lifting. "Do I know you?" Lila stumbled back, mortified. "Oh, no, I'm so sorry. I thought you were my friend," she said. "Blue Coat. Oh God, I'm so embarrassed." Her words tumbled over each other like dominoes. The man's lips curved faintly, amused. "Well," he said, his voice deep, controlled. "That's one way to start a Monday." Lila covered her face with both hands, heat burning her cheeks. People nearby chuckled softly, phones raised. "I'm really sorry," she whispered, backing away. "Please just pretend this never happened." She turned and bolted into the crowd, nearly slipping on the marble floor. The man stood still for a moment, watching her disappear between the commuters. He exhaled a quiet laugh, shaking his head. Adrian Cole, CEO of Cole Investments, a man who'd spent a decade learning to keep every moment calculated and composed, had just been hugged by a stranger in front of half of New York. And somehow he couldn't stop smiling. He glanced down. On the ground near his shoe lay a folded paper note, fallen from one of her grocery bags. He picked it up. In hurried handwriting it read, "You are stronger than you think." Adrian turned the note over in his fingers. The ink had smudged slightly from her touch. He looked toward the direction she had run, and felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in years: warmth, curiosity, maybe even hope. Somewhere across the city, Lila leaned against a brick wall, clutching her chest as her heart tried to catch up. She whispered to herself, "Only me." Who else hugs a total stranger at Grand Central Station? Little did she know, that single mistake would be the moment that changed both their lives forever. Hello everyone. Before we continue, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. That night, Lila could not sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face: the shock, the small amused smile, the piercing gray eyes that had met hers right before she ran. She buried her head under the pillow, groaning. "Why do things like this only happen to me?" she muttered. Her small studio apartment hummed with the city noise outside, the radiator clanking, the faint scent of coffee and detergent mixing in the air. On the wall hung her dream sketches of her future bakery, hand-drawn logos that said "Morning Hug." But dreams did not pay rent, and tomorrow's shift at the cafe started at 6. Somewhere across the city, in a glass-walled penthouse high above the skyline, Adrian Cole was still awake too. The folded note sat on his desk beside a tumbler of untouched whiskey. "You are stronger than you think, L." The handwriting was simple, slightly tilted to the right, with a small heart dotting the I. He had read it at least 10 times. It was ridiculous, he told himself. A random stranger hugs him by accident, and suddenly his mind will not stop replaying it. Adrian leaned back in his leather chair, staring at the lights of New York. The people below looked like veins of light, all moving with purpose. He envied that. For years, his life had been meetings, mergers, deadlines, and faces that smiled for profit. But for 5 seconds, in the middle of a crowded station, someone had held him like he was just a man, not a brand, not a name. The next morning, Lila rushed through the doors of the cafe, tying her apron while apologizing to her manager. "Sorry, Mr. Green, the subway was late." The older man sighed but smiled. "Relax, Lila. You are early compared to most." She exhaled in relief, brushing flour from her sleeves. The morning crowd trickled in students, office workers, and the usual group of business people in suits. By 8:30, the cafe was alive with chatter and the hiss of the espresso machine. Lila balanced 3 mugs on a tray when the doorbell chimed. She looked up and her heart stopped. Adrian Cole walked in. He looked even taller without the crowd. His dark coat fitted perfectly, his silver watch catching the morning light. Every instinct told her to hide behind the counter, but his eyes had already found hers. He smiled slightly, recognizing her. "You?" he said softly when she approached with a trembling smile. "We have met before, right?" Maybe," she stammered. "You look familiar." Her hands shook as she set down his coffee. He took a sip and studied her quietly. "You are better at serving coffee than giving surprise hugs," he teased, and her face flushed crimson. "Oh my God, please do not remind me," she groaned. He laughed, a low, warm sound that made her chest tighten. "Consider it forgiven," he said. "Actually, I owe you. That note you dropped it helped more than you know." "Note?" she blinked. "The one that said, 'You are stronger than you think.'" He held it up. "You wrote it, right?" She covered her mouth in embarrassment. "Oh, that. It was just something I scribbled for myself. I cannot believe you found it." "Then maybe I was supposed to," he said, his tone gentle. "I had a tough week. Reading it reminded me that strength does not always look like power." For a second, the cafe noise faded, and Lila forgot how to breathe. Before she could answer, the cashier called for help, breaking the spell. Adrian smiled faintly. "Maybe I will see you again, Lila." She blinked. "How did you—" "Your name tag," he said with a grin, then left, leaving the faint scent of cedar and coffee behind. She stood frozen, heart racing. He had said her name like it mattered. As the door closed, Lila whispered to herself, "Maybe mistakes are not always bad." She had no idea that this was only the beginning. Days passed, but Lila could not shake the memory of Adrian's smile. Each morning when she opened the cafe, she found herself glancing toward the door, half expecting him to walk in again. He did not, at least not for a while. Life returned to its usual rhythm, steaming milk, wiping counters, pretending everything was fine. Yet something inside her had shifted, like a quiet light she could not turn off. On the other side of the city, Adrian tried to bury himself in work. The boardroom's glass walls reflected his image back at him, flawless suit, calm face, everything in order. But even in the middle of a meeting, his mind drifted. That hug, that warmth, that girl. He caught himself smiling during a quarterly report, and his assistant Claire nearly dropped her tablet. "Sir, are you all right?" she asked. "Perfectly fine," he replied, though even he did not believe it. That evening, while reviewing a charity event his company was sponsoring a community art showcase, he saw the name of the catering company in the vendor list, Green Bean Cafe. His pulse jumped. The same cafe where Lila worked. He hesitated, then made a decision that surprised even him. "Claire, I will attend the event in person tomorrow. Cancel my dinner with the investors." Claire raised an eyebrow. "Personally, sir? You never attend vendor setups?" "Consider this an exception," he said with a faint smile. The next afternoon, the event hall buzzed with workers arranging tables and hanging lights. Lila was helping set up the coffee station, her apron dusted with flour, when she heard a familiar voice behind her. "You again," Adrian said, hands in his pockets, a teasing glint in his eyes. She turned, startled, almost spilling a tray of cups. "Mr. Cole! Adrian, I did not know you would be here." "I like surprises," he said. "Apparently, so do you." She blushed, remembering their first meeting. "We are just setting up for the art gala," she explained quickly. "Nothing fancy." "Looks more meaningful than most of my meetings," he said, looking around at the hand-painted signs and canvas art from local students. "Do you paint?" "A little," she admitted. "Mostly sketches. Nothing serious." "You should show me sometime," he said simply, and something in his tone made her heart skip. For the rest of the afternoon, they talked between tasks about art, about the city, about the strange ways people find strength. He listened, genuinely listened, which felt new to her. By sunset, the hall glowed with string lights, and the scent of coffee filled the air. When the event began, Adrian stood quietly near the back, watching Lila hand out drinks to guests, smiling shyly but sincerely. Every so often their eyes met, and she would look away too quickly. After the crowd thinned, he approached her again, holding 2 cups of cappuccino. "For the one who keeps everyone awake," he said, offering her one. "I should be thanking you," she laughed softly. "You do not seem like someone who drinks regular coffee." "Tonight I am," he said, clinking his cup gently against hers. "Besides, it tastes better when it is made by someone who believes in what they do." She looked at him curiously. "You sound like you are giving a speech." "Maybe," he replied, eyes warm. "Or maybe I just like seeing you believe in something." For a moment neither spoke. The music faded, leaving only the hum of the lights above them. "I should clean up," she murmured. "Of course," he said, stepping back. "But Lila, thank you for reminding me that people still do things because they care, not because they have to." As he turned to leave, she found herself calling out, "Adrian." He paused. "Yes? You never told me what you do," she said. He smiled faintly, tucking his hands into his coat pockets. "Let us just say, I work in investments. I like helping things grow." "That sounds nice," she said, not knowing the truth of his words. When he left, she stood in the soft glow of the lights, feeling something she had not felt in years' hope. And in his car, Adrian looked at the folded note he now carried in his wallet, whispering, "You are stronger than you think." Somehow, it no longer felt like advice. It felt like a promise. Over the next few weeks, Adrian kept finding excuses to stop by the cafe. Sometimes it was for coffee, sometimes just for a few minutes of quiet conversation that seemed to slow the rush of his world. To Lila, his visits felt unreal. A man like him, perfectly dressed, calm, kind, sitting across from her tiny counter like it was the most natural thing in the world. She tried to tell herself it was nothing, just polite talk, but every time he smiled, her heart betrayed her. One afternoon, rain poured against the windows, blurring the street outside. Lila was sketching between customers, her pencil tracing the outline of a steaming coffee cup, when the door opened and Adrian walked in, shaking droplets from his coat. "Looks like the city is melting," he said, his tone warm. "One caramel latte, right?" she asked with a grin. "You remember," he said, watching her move behind the counter. "You must have a memory for faces." "For regulars," she said. "But not for accidental hugs, I promise." He laughed softly, leaning on the counter as thunder rolled outside. "I might start believing that was fate instead of an accident," he said, half teasing, half serious. She blushed, pretending to focus on the milk frother. "Fate does not usually happen to people like me," she murmured. "Then maybe it should," he replied quietly. When she handed him the drink, their fingers brushed, and she felt a spark, small but undeniable. Later that week, she found an envelope left under a sugar jar at her counter. Inside was a simple invitation printed on cream paper. "Cole Foundation Charity Gala. You are invited as a guest of honor for your contribution to the community art event." She blinked, confused. Her contribution? She had only served coffee. Still, her heart raced. Maybe Adrian wanted to thank her. Maybe he wanted her there. The night of the gala, Lila stood outside the glass doors of the Grand Marlowe Hotel, rain once again misting the air. Her thrifted blue dress fluttered around her knees as she tried to calm her nerves. Inside, the hall shimmered with chandeliers, violins, and a sea of designer suits. She felt completely out of place. A woman in black velvet greeted her politely, leading her toward the seating area. "Your table, miss," she said. Lila nodded, clutching her small purse. Then she heard his name announced over the microphone. "Please welcome our host and benefactor, Mr. Adrian Cole, CEO of Cole Investments." The world tilted for a second. Lila froze, her breath catching in her throat. CEO, Adrian Cole. The man she had thought worked in investments was not just any investor. He owned one of the largest firms in the city. Her mind replayed every conversation, every kind word, every time he had listened without saying who he really was. She felt the ground slip beneath her. Adrian's speech began, smooth and sincere, about kindness and opportunity. But when his eyes met hers in the crowd, she looked away sharply. The applause sounded far away. She slipped out to the balcony, the cool air hitting her lungs like a shock. Inside, Adrian noticed her empty chair and followed. "Lila," he said softly behind her. She turned, eyes bright with hurt. "You lied to me." "I did not mean to," he said. "I just wanted you to know me without the label, without what I have." "You mean without the truth?" she said, her voice trembling. "You made me believe we were from the same world." "I never meant to make you feel small," he said gently. "You never did," she whispered, "until now." She turned to leave, but he stopped her with a quiet plea. "The person you met at the station, the one who laughed, who needed that hug, that was me, Lila. The rest is just noise." "Maybe," she said, tears in her voice, "but noise is all the world hears." Then she walked away, disappearing into the rain, leaving him standing in silence, the city glittering behind him like 1,000 unanswered questions. For days after the gala, Lila could not bring herself to return to the cafe. Her phone buzzed with messages from her boss, from her friend Megan, and even an unknown number she knew had to be Adrian. She ignored them all. She spent her nights sitting by the small window of her apartment, staring at the sketchbook on her lap, the one filled with dreams that suddenly felt foolish. "He is a millionaire," she whispered to herself, her voice small in the dark. "And I am just a girl who hugged the wrong man." The city outside buzzed with life, indifferent to her heartbreak. Across town, Adrian sat in his office, the view of the skyline doing little to calm him. For the first time in years, he felt helpless. He had faced hostile takeovers and ruthless negotiations, but nothing compared to losing the one person who had seen him without the armor of his success. Claire, his assistant, watched him pace by the window. "You have been distracted ever since the gala," she said quietly. "She found out who you are, did she not?" He nodded, and she walked away. Claire folded her arms. "Then show her who you really are. The world knows the CEO. Maybe it is time someone saw the man." Her words stayed with him. That weekend, Adrian visited the cafe for the first time since that night. Mr. Green looked up from behind the counter, surprised. "She has not come back since Tuesday," he said. "But she left this." He handed Adrian a folded napkin with a sketch on it, his face, drawn in soft pencil lines, with one sentence written underneath. "People like you are galaxies away." Adrian held the napkin tightly, a flicker of determination replacing the ache in his chest. 2 days later, Lila returned to the cafe, not to work, but to pick up her final paycheck. The place felt emptier than she remembered. As she reached for the envelope at the counter, a small card slipped out. It was an invitation. "Grand opening, Morning Hug Cafe." Her heart stuttered. Beneath the elegant print were her own drawings, the logo, the sketches from her wall. Shocked, she read the fine print. "Presented by the Cole Foundation, in collaboration with artist Lila Carter." She stood frozen. Before she could process it, the door opened, and Adrian walked in. No suit jacket this time, sleeves rolled up, eyes steady. "Before you get angry," he said gently, "please hear me out." She blinked, stunned. "You did this?" "We did this," he corrected. "You told me your dream was to create a place that felt like hope. You gave me that hope the day you hugged me by mistake." She shook her head slowly. "You think you can fix everything with money?" "No," he said, stepping closer. "Money built the walls between us. This is not about that. I wanted to build something that belonged to you." He handed her a set of keys. The Morning Hug Cafe opens next week. Your sketches, your recipes, your story, all of it. And no one will know it came from me unless you want them to. Lila stared at the keys in her hand, her throat tight. Why would you do this? Because kindness changed me, he said simply. And I do not want to go back to the man I was before that day. For a long moment, silence filled the cafe, except for the faint hiss of the espresso machine. Then she whispered, I do not know if I can trust this. You do not have to trust me, he said softly. Just trust yourself. You are stronger than you think. Her eyes flicked up at the familiar words, and something in her chest cracked open. She exhaled shakily. You remembered. I never forgot, he said. Outside, the rain had stopped, and a thin line of sunlight broke through the clouds. Lila looked at the keys again, then at him. All right, she said quietly. Let us see if mistakes can turn into beginnings. Adrian smiled, relief washing through him. For the first time, it felt like maybe they both were finding their way home. The grand opening of Morning Hug Cafe arrived on a crisp Saturday morning, sunlight spilling through the wide windows and catching the golden letters painted on the glass. The aroma of cinnamon, vanilla, and freshly brewed coffee filled the air. Lila stood behind the counter, her hands trembling as she adjusted the last bouquet of daisies near the register. It felt unreal, her name on the sign, her sketches turned into real menus, her recipes printed in elegant script. She looked around at the small but beautiful space. Warm lights, wooden tables, soft music. It was everything she had dreamed of and more. When the first customers entered, she forced herself to smile and greet them, but her mind was somewhere else. Adrian had not come. Part of her was relieved, but another part, the part that still remembered his gentle voice and that note he carried, kept searching the doorway every time the bell chimed. Around noon, when the crowd thinned, she stepped outside to breathe. The sky was bright, the street buzzing with weekend energy. That was when she saw him. Adrian stood across the street, hands in his pockets, watching through the window. He looked unsure, almost shy, which was a strange thing to see on a man who once commanded boardrooms. Lila crossed the street slowly. You came, she said. I told myself I would stay away, let you have your day, he admitted. But I wanted to see you smile when people walked in. She glanced down, fighting a smile that threatened to appear anyway. It feels strange, she confessed. Like I am standing in someone else's dream. No, he said softly. You are standing in your own. For a few quiet moments, they just watched the people through the window, families, couples, students, all laughing, sipping, living in the place she had built. You did this, Lila, Adrian said. You turned a mistake into something that matters. You helped, she said, looking up at him. Maybe, he replied, but I think you helped me more. He hesitated, as if measuring his next words carefully. There is something I need to tell you. What is it? She asked. The cafe, it is doing better than we expected. Investors want to expand it, turn it into a community program, maybe even a chain. But only if you lead it. Lila blinked in disbelief. Me? You, he said. They loved your story. They believe in you. I believe in you. She felt the weight of it. The impossible idea that someone like her could suddenly matter in a world like his. I do not know if I can do that, she said softly. You can, he said. You are stronger than you think. Those same words again, simple, steady, unshakable. Something inside her shifted. All right, she said finally. But if we do this, it has to stay real. Affordable coffee, local artists, people first. No corporate gloss. Adrian smiled. Deal. He held out his hand and she took it. The warmth that passed between them was quiet but undeniable. Over the next few weeks, they worked side by side. The cafe became not just a shop, but a heartbeat in the neighborhood. Lila hosted art nights, poetry evenings, and small charity drives. Adrian came often but never tried to take credit. He swept floors, brewed coffee, fixed lights, things no one expected from a millionaire. People whispered about their partnership, wondering what it meant, but neither of them cared. One evening after closing, Lila found him cleaning a spill near the counter. "You do not have to do that," she said, laughing. "Maybe I like feeling useful," he replied. "You always were," she said quietly. Their eyes met, and for the first time, the silence between them felt full of things unsaid but understood. Outside, the city lights flickered like stars trapped between buildings. For a long while, they just stood there, two people from different worlds, finally realizing they might be looking in the same direction. That night, Lila wrote a new note and placed it under the counter where the first one had once fallen. It said, "Sometimes mistakes are just love wearing a disguise." She smiled to herself, not knowing that Adrian would find it the next morning. Success came faster than either of them expected. Within a few months, Morning Hug Cafe became the kind of place that people wrote about in city blogs and local papers. Customers said it had a heart, that every cup of coffee tasted like kindness. Lila often smiled when she heard that, but a small part of her worried. Attention brought questions, and questions could bring misunderstanding. Adrian, meanwhile, found himself in a difficult position. The board at Cole Investments had started to notice how much time he was spending away from the office. Rumors began to spread that their CEO was distracted, that he was wasting company resources on a small neighborhood cafe. One afternoon, as Adrian stepped into his office, he found two of his senior partners waiting. "Adrian," one of them began cautiously, "we need to discuss this project you have been funding, Morning Hug Cafe. The shareholders are concerned. It looks unprofessional." Adrian set down his briefcase, calm but firm. "It is a personal venture, not a corporate one. The foundation is allowed to support local initiatives." "Supporting," the other man said, "is different from personally running it. You are the face of this company. People are talking." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Then let them talk." He dismissed them politely, but their words lingered. That evening, as he arrived at the cafe, he found reporters outside snapping photos. "Mr. Cole, is it true you are romantically involved with the cafe owner?" one shouted. Another added, "Are company funds being used to finance your relationship?" Lila stood frozen behind the counter, pale and shaken. Adrian pushed past the cameras, shielding her from the flash. "That is enough," he said sharply. "Leave her out of this." The next morning, tabloids carried headlines: "Millionaire's secret romance with barista," and "Cafe scandal brewing at Cole Investments." Lila's phone would not stop ringing. Her social media flooded with comments, some curious, some cruel. She turned it off, her chest tight. When Adrian arrived, she was packing up boxes. "Lila, do not," he said, stepping forward. "This will pass." "No, it will not," she said, her voice breaking. "You saw what they wrote. They think I am using you. They think you are buying me." "I do not care what they think," he said. "I do," she whispered. "Because this cafe was supposed to be about hope, not gossip." She looked at him, tears gathering in her eyes. "I cannot let everything we built become another headline." "Then let me fix it," he said urgently. "I will make a statement." "And what will you say?" she asked, almost pleading. "That the poor girl you helped fell in love with you? That you turned charity into romance? No matter what you say, they will twist it." He hesitated, the truth in her words cutting deep. "Lila." "Please," she said softly. "Just go, before we both lose everything." He wanted to argue, to hold her, to promise it would all fade, but her eyes told him she needed space. Slowly, he left. For days, the cafe stayed closed, its windows dark, a temporarily closed sign taped to the glass. The city moved on, but Adrian could not. He called every day, sent letters that came back unopened. He watched from his car as people stopped, looked through the window, and walked away disappointed. Meanwhile, Lila spent her days at home, staring at the keys on her table, wondering if she had made a terrible mistake. The silence between them was louder than any rumor. One evening, as rain began to fall, she walked to the cafe and stood outside, watching the reflection of the sign in the puddles. Morning Hug, The name made her chest ache. She whispered to herself, "You said I was stronger than I think. Maybe you were wrong." But deep down, she hoped he was still right. Across town, Adrian sat in his dark office, holding the original note she had written. He traced the smudged ink with his thumb and whispered, "You are stronger than you think. Both of us are." Then he picked up the phone and made a call that would change everything. The next morning, the city woke up to a headline that none of them expected. Adrian Cole steps down as CEO. The news spread like wildfire. Reporters crowded outside Cole Investments, employees whispered in hallways, and investors demanded answers. But Adrian was nowhere to be found. In a heartfelt public statement, he wrote, "A company can replace a name, but I cannot replace my integrity. I will not let power define who I am." The business world buzzed with shock, but for Adrian, it felt like freedom. For the first time in 10 years, he walked through the city without a schedule, without an assistant, without cameras following his every step. He went straight to the one place that still felt real, the cafe. When he reached the corner, his heart sank. The windows were still dark, the sign still taped to the glass. He unlocked the door quietly and stepped inside. Dust floated in the soft light filtering through the blinds. He looked around, memories flooding back the first day she smiled at him, the sketches on the walls, the note she left under the counter. He found it again, still tucked where she had placed it. Sometimes mistakes are just love wearing a disguise. He smiled sadly, whispering, "You were right." That night, he made another decision. 2 weeks later, Lila returned to the cafe to collect her things. She had decided to sell it, to start fresh somewhere else. But when she arrived, she froze. The door was open, and soft music played inside. The lights were on, and the air smelled of fresh coffee. On the front window, a new sign hung. Grand Reopening Morning Hug Cafe, a place for second chances. Her breath caught. Inside, people were gathered, laughing and talking. And standing at the counter, pouring coffee with his sleeves rolled up, was Adrian. For a moment, she could not move. He looked up and saw her. The noise around them faded. "You are open again," she said finally. "We are open again," he replied. "I thought you left." "I did," he said softly. "But I realized leaving everything behind meant leaving the best thing that ever happened to me. So I gave up the company." She stared at him, stunned. "You what?" "I stepped down," he said. "I wanted to prove something to myself, to you, to everyone, that love is not a scandal and kindness is not weakness." "You gave up everything for this?" she whispered. "For us," he said simply, "and for what this place stands for." Lila's eyes filled with tears. Around them, people continued to talk, unaware that something extraordinary was unfolding. "You do not have to do this," she said. "I already did," he replied. "And if I could go back to that day at the station, I would let you hug me all over again." She laughed through her tears. "You are impossible." "Maybe," he said, stepping closer. "But I think we both needed a little impossible to find something real." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the original note, now creased and worn. "This belongs to you," he said. She shook her head. "No, it belongs here," she said, taking it and sliding it under the counter again. That is where it all started. The crowd began to applaud as someone announced, "To Morning Hug Cafe, where mistakes become miracles." Lila looked around, overwhelmed. "You did all this," she whispered. "We did," he corrected. "Together." The music swelled. The lights seemed to glow warmer, and for the first time since that rainy day in Grand Central Station, Lila felt at peace. The weight of misunderstanding, of fear, of distance, it all fell away. When Adrian reached for her hand, she did not hesitate. "So," he said with a smile, "friends again?" She smiled back, her voice steady. "Something like that, maybe even better." Quote, "A year later, the Morning Hug Cafe had become more than just a business. It was a movement. There were now 3 locations across the city, each decorated with local art and filled with laughter, community, and hope. People came not just for coffee, but for connection, for warmth, for the feeling that life could still surprise them. Lila stood behind the counter one morning, watching the sunlight pour through the windows, illuminating the words painted above the doorway. "You are stronger than you think." The same words that had started everything. She smiled every time someone paused to read them. Adrian walked in, carrying 2 cups of coffee from the machine like he always did. "I still cannot believe you make better coffee than me," he teased. "That is because you rush the process," she replied with a grin. "Good things take time." He leaned against the counter, watching her with quiet affection. "You sound like you are talking about us." She raised an eyebrow, pretending to be unimpressed. "Maybe I am." Their banter had become effortless, their connection deeper than either could have predicted. The scandal that once threatened to destroy them had long been replaced by admiration and respect. The press now called them the couple who turned a mistake into a miracle. Lila used to blush at the title, but now she simply accepted it. Life had a way of turning wrong turns into right ones. Later that afternoon, Adrian called her outside. "Close your eyes," he said. "Why?" "Because I said so." She sighed but obeyed. He guided her a few steps forward, his hand warm around hers. "All right," he whispered. "Open them." When she did, she gasped. In front of the cafe, a small garden had been built overnight, a quiet green space with benches, flowers, and a bronze plaque that read, "Dedicated to the day everything changed." Beneath it, etched in delicate script, were the words, "The first hug was a mistake, the second was destiny." Lila's eyes shimmered as she turned to him. "You did this?" "We did this," he said. "I wanted everyone who passes by to know that even chaos can lead to something beautiful." She took a shaky breath, her heart swelling. "You still have a way of making me cry," she whispered. "That was the goal," he said with a smile. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. For a moment, she could not breathe. "Adrian," she said softly. "I am not asking because the world expects it," he said, voice steady. "I am asking because every version of my life without you feels incomplete." "Lila, will you marry me?" Tears welled in her eyes, her hands trembling as she covered her mouth. Around them, people had stopped to watch, the afternoon sunlight wrapping them in a golden glow. "Yes," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Yes, of course." The crowd erupted in applause, the cafe door swung open, and the smell of coffee and rain mixed in the air. Adrian slipped the ring on her finger, simple and elegant, just like her. He pulled her close, their foreheads touching. "You hugged me by mistake," he murmured, "and now I am never letting go." She laughed through her tears. "You promise?" "Forever," he said. The camera flashes, the noise of the city, the heartbeat of their cafe, all of it faded into one quiet truth. Love does not need perfection, only courage. As the evening fell, Lila and Adrian danced slowly under the glow of the cafe lights while customers clapped and cheered. The sign above them gleamed softly, "Morning Hug Cafe," and for everyone who passed by that night, it was clear. What started as a mistake had become a story of hope, of love, and of the beautiful mess that makes us human. And as the final light flickered inside the cafe, one note remained on the counter, framed in glass. "You are stronger than you think."